Hello, everybody in the crowd. Clearly, as I was in a discussion with some people over here, it's time to buy. Crowds are thinning, conferences are kind of slim, so it's the buy season. So hopefully you guys take advantage of that, because once these rooms are packed and you can't get tickets to events, then it's a time to kind of like realize we're at a peak. But anyway, so what am I going to talk to you today about? Actually, I'm not going to talk to you almost a thing about blockchain technology. I'm going to talk to you about vocabulary. Let's go back to first, second grade, where you learned one of the basics of grammar school and vocabulary. And so the vocabulary word of the day is decentralization. And it's a term that's used in and out of our industry, a term that's used in the white paper of Bitcoin, as well as every single white paper of almost every single ICO that has crossed the landscape of 2017 going into 2018. So decentralization. And in the many discussions I've had with people, I've come to this conclusion that as passionate as this entire industry has become over this word, it's actually not a goal. And if it is your goal, you've got a really shitty goal. You shouldn't be achieving this as a goal. And so one might ask, well, okay, Paul, you're complaining about it, it's not a goal, then what exactly is it and what should we be doing? Well, the reason why I say that decentralization is not a goal is because, number one, it's ill-defined. There's no such thing as 100% decentralized. And you hear people slinging insults at each other about this project, your blockchain, your implementation, and your core devs, slinging insults saying like, oh, but you're not decentralized. And in so many ways, they are, but they're not, depending on what your definition is. And really, it's depending on what your goal is. Some of the internal battles and our huge civil war in the cryptocurrency space, especially this whole Bitcoin Cash, during that time, you'll see that insults were thrown both ways. And the argument's always, you're not decentralized. You're centralized because of this and that. But at the heart, it's because they've defined it differently. So defining your project as being the decentralized blah, blah, blah is ill-defining what you're doing. And it's not actually pinpointing what are you trying to achieve. What is the goal? How are you disrupting an industry? How are you making it faster, better, cheaper, better user experience? So it's ill-defined, and as I'd mentioned, there's no such thing as 100%. There's almost no such thing as 100% of anything. Our company has an introduction. My name is Paul Puey. I'm CEO and co-founder of Edge. Our company builds a wallet, a security platform for dApps. And people ask us, are you secure? Are you 100% secure? It doesn't exist. And so it depends on you as an individual what you care about from a viewpoint of the attack vector of security. So in the same sense, there's no such thing as 100% decentralized. So the question now is, what are the goals? If decentralization isn't the goal, then what should we have as a goal when we're building technology, especially technology that's leveraging this ecosystem, cryptocurrency or blockchain if you want to call it? So a lot of people fall into a few different buckets of why they became passionate about this industry. Why are there hundreds of conferences around the world targeted at this general industry, and why are there thousands of people and billions of dollars entering this space? So some of the goals, accessibility. I think we all know that from a global accessibility point of view, digital payments and digital ownership of value has not been globally accessible. It's something that has been relatively limited to the financial elite. Even the people that are middle class here in the US are still amongst the financial elite. And they have access to this global digital payment method, but many people don't. Another term you hear about as well is censorship resistance. That can be a goal. The goal of being able to make sure that what you are doing, that information that you are transmitting can't be stopped, and that you can get that information from you, point A to B. And that term isn't specific to financial transactions. It could just simply be the information you want to share. But in the terms of cryptocurrency, it is a financial transaction. Can I make a payment, send money to someone else, and that payment can't be stopped? And then the question all being is, who could or am I preventing from stopping that payment? Like, who am I worried about stopping it? Is it my internet provider? Is it a bank? Is it a government that I'm concerned about stopping that payment with respect to censorship resistance? Another aspect is cost. even though we're in a phase where cryptocurrency has seen dramatically increased cost to transact, definitely one of its big promises early on was fast, cheap transactions. And the definition of cheap and the definition of fast is all relative. I don't like waiting 10 minutes to know that I've received money, so that to me is slow. I also don't like to wait 3 days to wire something across the world. So 10 minutes sounds fast when you're going across the world. It sounds really slow when you're trying to buy a cup of coffee. So the applicability of the technology and what you are building to use this technology will define whether or not you've achieved this goal. You're being compared against the status quo. So if you're faster than that, then great. If you're not, then you failed. Who cares if you're using decentralization or not? It's what is the goal you're trying to achieve. Privacy. I just got off a privacy panel. I listened to a talk on privacy coins. And this is something that this technology can definitely help with, but it's definitely not an end-all be-all. And many projects that promote privacy through decentralization, many times they don't even realize that they've just made privacy actually worse. And then another aspect of decentralization, which people don't realize, every single centralized company, every bank, Google, Facebook, they all implement this aspect of decentralization for this goal, is just fault tolerance. Just the fact that you have multiple nodes, backups of data or networking channels, so that if one goes down, you are still up and you haven't faltered. So fault tolerance is as well another goal. And just by having data on 2 drives, you've implemented a little nugget of decentralization. Is it what anyone in this industry will call decentralized? No. But it goes to show you that the term is ill-defined because it's a giant gray area. It's not you are or you're not. It's just simply a sliding scale in different aspects, implementing and trying to achieve different goals. So let's take a few little examples of decentralization as applied, how it may have intended to achieve some goals and possibly where it failed. And so BitMessage. BitMessage was a decentralized communication channel protocol that allowed people to communicate very, very privately. And the way that the protocol worked was via encryption, in that if all of us here in this room were using BitMessage, each of us have a public and private key. And so I might have to rewind a little bit into technology, but public and private keys, the cryptographic technology that Bitcoin is based on, not only let you sign transactions, but they also let you encrypt data. So you can create a public and private key, give me your public key, I can encrypt some data and only you can decrypt it. I can't, no one else in the room can. So imagine if we had a chat app where every time you wanted to message someone, you encrypted a message with their public key. Nobody else could decrypt it. And then you broadcast it to the entire network. And only the right person that had the correct private key could read it. That's really private. Part of the privacy is that I didn't actually send a message to the correct person. I sent it to everybody. I sent it to you, you bounce it to her, you bounce it to him. It just bounces everywhere on the network. That was how BitMessage worked. And so a lot of people lauded this technology as being the perfect, most private communication mechanism, the most private chat app. Problem was, as you can probably imagine, from the viewpoint of usability and scalability, every single person on the network had to see every single transaction, and they actually had to decrypt every, not transaction, but every message. So you basically got, as an individual user, just trying to send a message to grandma, maybe a few houses down the street, you had to get the entire fire hose of every message sent on the entire network. It was really high privacy in that sense, but it was also not very scalable, not very usable. And so what effectively happened to this very, very decentralized protocol, every node on the network was participating, it didn't get used. And not only that, there were proposals put into place to say, well, let's make this a bit more scalable. Let's actually channel traffic based on certain segments of the network, where I didn't actually broadcast it to everybody. I would know that you were in a certain segment of the network and start to channel it to that direction of the network, and only a subset of people would have to decrypt this message, or try to. So by segmenting the network and not broadcasting to everybody, I'm actually scaling down the level of privacy. Because now, by analyzing the traffic, you know that I'm sending a message to a group of people. Maybe not one person, maybe you can't see the message, but you knew the rough group of people that I was sending it to. And so that compromise is one that was proposed but actually never implemented. One of the big reasons was because so few people used the protocol, because it was so unusable. And one of the goals, or at least ways of achieving a goal in privacy, is actually adoption. The more people that are using that technology, especially in a privacy world, the harder it is to identify the actors that are transmitting on the network. If only 5 people are using the most private technology in the world, well, you know that they're communicating between each other, and that's it. So the implementation, while idea was strong, and the goal of privacy was there, being insanely decentralized, as strongly as they could, actually detracted from their ability to achieve that goal. I was in a discussion, a little convo with an investor, I think in Korea, on one of my trips. And it was in a cryptocurrency event, it was in a meetup, and I asked him what he did. He goes, I invest in some projects. And I go, well, which ones do you like? He goes, I only do decentralized projects. I go, oh, okay. Well, what does that mean? Like dApps, protocols, coins? And he said, yeah, all the above. I've got some ICO projects, I've got some coins. And then I asked him the key question, why? Why do you only invest in decentralized projects? Why not a regular chat app? Or why not the competitor to Facebook or the next Uber? And he said, because I don't like centralized companies and projects. And so why? And he simply said, because they compromise us. They abuse us and our information. And then he gave the example of Facebook. And he said, Facebook, this was just after I can't remember, one of the not necessarily hacks, but the exposés that Facebook had given up a ton of our information out to the public. And he didn't like that, and that's fair. I don't like it either. And I said, okay, that makes sense. You like this decentralization movement. It's kind of anti-Facebook. And I asked, well, what would you like to see compete against Facebook? Like, what is a product that can solve that problem? I removed the word decentralization and said, okay, what's the problem you want to solve? And for him, it's the compromise of our information. It's the privacy aspect. He didn't have an answer. He didn't have a project that was really helping solve that problem. And then I suggested one to him. And I said, the one project that I'm aware of that is in some ways competing against Facebook, that it's actually getting some level of adoption, is Steemit. And so I asked him, have you heard of Steemit? He was, yeah, actually I have. It seems like a good project. I know some people are using it. And I said, okay, well, that's great. I don't know if you're aware, but everything you put on Steemit is 100% public. There's nothing to compromise because it's compromised from day one. I can aggregate all that information and sell it, but so can anyone else. You have zero privacy. When you send a message, upvote a post, or you make a post, everything is on a blockchain, and that's fully exposed. And so if your goal is kind of personal protection of people's data and not getting compromised by large organizations, institutions such as the Facebooks of the world, then you're backing the wrong horse. This is kind of the wrong technology to achieve the goal that you have. Now, there are technologies a lot that are also backed and promoted by the cryptocurrency space, such as just basic encryption. That has nothing to do with cryptocurrency, doesn't have anything to do with blockchain. Just tech that encrypts data. That, in and of itself, can help achieve that goal. With respect to social media, I'll be honest, I don't think we're ever going to see a social media platform where we can arbitrarily share data between one person, a group of people, a subset of those people, disconnect myself from being friends with somebody, and therefore they don't get access to my data. I don't think we're ever going to see a social media site with that level of permission access, meaning who can access what dynamically, that will have any level of kind of strong decentralization. It's just a hard problem to solve. The more people that have to access data, the harder it is to protect it. That's a golden truth. As soon as more people have to access it, the harder it is to protect. If only I have to access it, that's going to be easier for me to protect than if me and my wife have to access it, or me and several coworkers to a group of customers. We can improve things, but guaranteed that's always the truth. It's always just going to be harder. And then let's talk about kind of the definition of decentralization and how it's poor in our most beloved technology and project in Bitcoin. Created the Civil War, everyone disagreed, they threw insults at each other. Let's kind of analyze why. Why did they say you're decentralized or you're not, you're centralized? So what would be the ultimate decentralized Bitcoin if we had to create one or live in a world of one? People talk about mining a lot. Like, mining is centralized. There is, 5 major mining pools in the world. So ideally, that would be decentralized. But what's enough? If 5 pools isn't enough, is 50? Is 500? There's always going to be a hierarchy. Is it enough once every single person on every single wallet, on every single phone, is actually mining, and they are a 100% full node? And if that was the case and that was the requirement, what type of impact would that have on the use of the network? We could do that. We could say that that's a requirement of the network, but now how distributed would we be from the viewpoint of utility and use? How many people would be using that network? And if that was 5 people that are all mining on their computer, is that enough? Is it 50? Is it 500? And at that point, what were you really trying to achieve? Was it censorship resistance that you were trying to achieve? And if so, by requiring everyone to be that full mining node, which originally in the white paper was the definition of a node, have you achieved that goal? A lot of people talk about it from the viewpoint of nodes as well. Like, how many nodes are effectively on the network? And how many is enough? One of the things to think about with respect to censorship resistance in Bitcoin is, who are you trying to protect from? Who are the people that can stop a transaction? And what kind of distribution of nodes and mining is effectively necessary? So kind of, we always consider the highest level of like the godlike entity that we're afraid of is government. The good thing is we don't have one in this world. There are multiple. So in my view, to achieve a level of censorship resistance doesn't need this gigantically broad level of decentralization. It just needs the right amount in different places of the world under different demographics and geographics. So having a handful to several hundred in each country, that at least prevents censorship resistance from one country, because you can hit the internet and send and receive a transaction from potentially hundreds of other countries in the world. Do we need it to be 10,000 nodes? Do we need it to be 50,000? Do we need to be 100,000? Not necessarily. To achieve this kind of holy grail of censorship resistance, it's really preventing against that God-level attack of government, which simply means you need to be existing in multiple different jurisdictions. And the goal that each individual needing to hold and run a node, while admirable, might not be the requirement. And what are you compromising from the viewpoint of goals to achieve that? And we talked about some of the goals of accessibility. If you're compromising accessibility to achieve that level of decentralization, is that what you care about or not care about? As well, development. This is the thing I talked about in, actually, it's funny, about 3 years ago I gave a talk on how to keep Bitcoin decentralized. Now I'm kind of giving almost an inverse talk of that, is why it doesn't matter. But in that talk, one of the fundamental things that I mentioned that many people weren't talking about at that time was the decentralization of development. And people put overemphasis, or were putting overemphasis on mining and nodes and whatnot. And I started saying, but what about just the people that work on the project, that write the code? There's no such thing as trustlessness. That just doesn't exist, kind of like there's no such thing as fully decentralized or fully secure or fully private. There's no such thing as trustless. You are always going to have some trust. I hate the term don't trust, verify. I think that's one of the lamest terms to use to promote an ecosystem. because as humans, we are born to need to trust. Imagine if you trusted absolutely nothing and nobody, you would be building and creating every piece of tech, the house you live in, the car you drive, the food you eat. We wouldn't advance as a civilization if all we did was not trust and verified. You just simply wouldn't. Now, within the landscape of where you trust, let's try to minimize it while keeping the same level of efficiency, and that's what cryptocurrency is doing. It's helping you reduce the trust without reducing the efficiency of transacting between each other. So in an aspect of trust, getting back to the development aspect and the team that does development, having a more distributed team of people, of teams that implement a protocol was one of the more important things that I saw. And that gave a level of, once again, a different goal, fault tolerance. So I see, from our point of view, fault tolerance as being one of the key goals as well to achieve within a project. And when you have multiple teams working on the same protocol, much like we do with the internet, many people liken Bitcoin to the next internet. It's the internet of money. With the internet, there is no one team that implements the protocol of how to send a packet from one router to another, to your Wi-Fi, to your computer. There is no one team, there is no one software, there's no one code base. It's implemented by Apple, by Sun, by, that's old Sun, are they still around? By, you name the company, Cisco, it's implemented by a bunch of different teams. And guaranteed in every software there's bugs and there's issues, and that might take down a part of the network, but it doesn't take down the internet. So from a fault tolerance point of view, which is a good goal to have, looking at the distribution of the team and the people that work on a project is a fundamental key piece that I think is slightly overlooked. So to kind of recap, if we feel like decentralization is not a goal and we've identified the different goals, what effectively are people trying to build? And we've gone through the entire kind of all of last year going into this year of the decentralization is everything. I'm decentralizing this, I'm decentralizing that. The push and the kind of end purpose of this talk is really to redefine that. Is for every project that's being built here, is to now say, here's what we are developing, here's how we're actually disrupting, how we are saving people money, how are we making something faster and simpler, or just easier. And by developing that, we can actually take this technology, whether it be Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS, Dash, or whatnot, and help drive that to the masses, because then it'll actually focus your thought process, it'll focus your team and your efforts around what really matters, as opposed to buzzwords. Because we've had a lot of buzzwords. This is one of the biggest buzzwords, the ones that people thought they can slap onto the side of an ICO and make it succeed. But we're in a super still exciting phase of this industry. Many people here are part of projects that are getting built. I'm excited because easily we could be in the history books for this next generation of kind of financial and communication products. But I do want to succeed. I want good projects to come about. And so hence, hopefully you do identify what you're trying to do, achieve those goals, mark what they are, achieve them, and let's make history together. Cool. Thanks a lot, everybody.